Today, we're going to talk about Spain under Philippe II. We're going to go through the end of Spain, France, and then England. Make sure you're taking your notes, you're ready to underline and highlight, and that you're listening. First of all, you have to review that we've talked about Charles V yesterday and how he went from becoming a king to being an emperor, which I told you yesterday that we talked about with kings, they have kingdoms, and that empires are bigger because they have kingdoms underneath them. They're vast, they're larger. So when we talk about a king trying or becoming an emperor, that means that he is expanding his territory and his power. So remember that Charles V will become frustrated and step down, and the throne will be given to his son Philippe II. So during Philippe's reign, the Spanish Empire had reached its peak under him. Okay, American colonies were consistently sending gold and silver home, and Spain was very wealthy and powerful during this time. Now, one thing you need to understand, though, is that Philippe will be a devout Catholic, and he will also be a leader in the Counter-Reformation, which you learned last unit about the Counter-Reformation and how it was a move to bring individuals back to the Catholic Church, and that the Catholic Church was trying to revamp, because reform means to change or to improve. And he was a leader in the Spanish Inquisition, which we've talked about the Inquisition a couple of times, and it's where they torture and people are labeled as heretics, and the church convicts them of being guilty of opposing the church, which is a horrible thing to do during this time. And Philippe is going to be part of this. What he's going to try to do is he's going to marry Mary the First. That's funny. And she's the King of England, or Queen of England, excuse me. If you remember, she was known as Bloody Mary. She killed Protestants in England because she was a devout Catholic as well. What will happen, though, is Mary will die from cancer and she will produce no heir. So Elizabeth I will now take over and rule England. And if you remember, Elizabeth is going to restore the Church of England that her father had established. But we'll get to that in a little bit. This is Philippe II. I thought this was a funny picture. He loves Catholic girls. And this is Mary the First. This is also a YouTube video, but we do not have time to watch this on this video. But we can definitely post the link so you can watch it at a later date. Now, Philippe wanted a united Catholic Europe. Okay, he wants everyone in Europe to be Catholic. But remember that we have the Protestants now in Europe, and it is a big movement, and people are following it, and they are true to Protestantism. So what he's going to do is he's going to try to fight against the spread of Protestants in Europe. Now, one other thing that he's going to do is that he's going to have conflict with England. Now, if you remember from last unit, we talked about the monarchs of England, and we talked about Edward VI and Mary I, and then you have Elizabeth. Well, Elizabeth is going to usher in the golden age of England. So when we talk about a golden age, you know that is when the throne and the people are living prosperously and the nation is strong. So Elizabeth is going to be a strong female leader. She does not take any crap off of any man, and she doesn't even get married. That's how strong she is. She doesn't get married because she wants no man above her. So Elizabeth is going to kind of antagonize the Spanish ships that are returning from the colonies with treasure. She's going to allow her ships to attack them, okay? And Philippe is going to say, oh, all right, Elizabeth, I see what you're doing. So he decides to invade England. Now, he has two purposes. It's not just to get back at her for her, raiding his ships, but also she says, you know what I'll do? Or he says, I'll take over England and make them Catholic. I will conquer Elizabeth. Now, he has this elaborate plan. He builds the Spanish Armada, which is a fleet of ships, about 130 ships and 20,000 soldiers. And he thinks this is a wonderful plan. Here's a picture right here of the ships. Now, in 1588, they decide to sail into the English Channel. And Philippe thought they were going to be invincible. He was like, oh, she will not beat us. They can't deal with it. They can't handle us. But the English ships are going to sink most of the Armada using fire ships, which are like ships that are on fire, and they push them in near the other ships. Also, a storm known as the Protestant winds destroyed the others. So they talk about that the storms had come and destroyed the ships, and they kind of said that it was the Protestant winds. So what you need to understand is that Philippe's kind of got the odds against him. England's got some better tactics. They're led by Sir Walter Raleigh, and he's an expert with ships, and he can navigate and he can fight. And so he's going to take the English fleets, and they're going to outmaneuver the Spanish ships. And also, the storm is going to work in the English's favor. And we do not have time to watch that YouTube video either. The decline of Spain. The defeat of the Armada is going to it's going to symbolize Spain's decline. And it's also going to show you that England is rising in their power. And another reason that Spain's going to have some decline is that the king managed his government poorly. You have to have a strong official in your government. You have to have a strong leader who can manage things, understands how everything is interworking and how it's connected. Because if you have one area that's lacking, it'll eventually tear apart the whole rest of the system. And Philippe was not very good at managing his government. Also, he is going to spend money from the Americas. So all the gold and silver they were receiving from their colonies, he's going to spend it on warfare, which can be, can deplete your funds very quickly. And another thing that Spain did is that they did not develop industry. So eventually, they don't have a means of making a large amount of money within their country, domestically, at home, not just relying on the colonies. So their economy will eventually lag. Now, we're going to talk about France. So you have an absolute monarchy in France, and first of all, you're going to have some religious wars with Henry IV. So I'm going to give you kind of like a breakdown of what's going on. In 1560, one of 10 people in France had become a Huguenot. You need to write this down, and you should be writing notes in general, but Huguenot is going to be an important word, so you need to underline it or highlight it or whatever Miss Cannon has you do, or Miss Piner, but you need to understand that a Huguenot is going to be a French Protestant. In 1562, the Huguenots and the Catholics began a civil war, which this isn't unfamiliar to you. You know that Protestants and Catholics physically fight each other during this time, and you learned that when it started in the Renaissance with the Reformations, that these people will shed each other's blood. 10 years later, the Catholic Queen of France, she's going to order the killing of the Huguenots in Paris, okay? So she's saying that she wants them eradicated and killed. She killed Huguenot nobles. Remember that nobles usually in a hierarchy are right below the royal upper class, and they're right there. They have education. They're well established. They have money. Well, she's going to order that they get killed. Now, they are in Paris because they are attending the wedding of Henry of Navarre. Now, he is a French nobleman. Here's a picture. Okay. And this picture represents the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. This is what it'll become known as, because what is going to happen is that a massacre is a mass killing of people. So when we talk about this event, the violence is going to start to eventually spread to other parts of Europe, and the Huguenot death toll will rise and range from about 10,000 people to 70,000 people, which is a large number during that time. Still a large number now. Now, Henry Navarre, he is going to be a Protestant. He's a Huguenot during this time. So what he does is that to escape death, he is going to deny his religion. So he's going to say, I am no longer a Huguenot. I'm no longer a Protestant. This is not me. Like, I'm not going to worship that way anymore. So years later, he's going to fight to become the King Henry IV of France. Now listen, he's just changing his name. He's the same person, but he has a new title now and a new position, because he's going to become the King of France. Now, in 1593, he's going to convert to Catholicism because he has denounced, remember that he denied his religion. So he's going to denounce Protestantism and switch to Catholicism, okay? And he converts, which means he changes it up, in 1593. Now, he gave the Huguenots certain rights in order to restore peace. So, he's going to issue the Edict of Nantes, in 1598. Now, this document is going to allow Huguenots limited freedom, okay? It's going to allow them limited freedom, but it's going to allow them to worship as they pleased. Okay? And it's going to stress that Catholicism was the official religion of France. So Henry is still going to sympathize with the Huguenots and show them some grace and mercy in France. But he still says, okay, the official religion of France is still Catholicism. Okay? So Henry of Navarre turns into Henry IV. Same dude, different title. Like it's new. Alright, moving on. We're going to talk about Louis XIII and Cardinal Richelieu. Louis XIII is going to be a young king, and he is going to take over after Henry IV is assassinated, and he's the next king, but he's very young. So when you have a child or a young minor in, minor means teenager, young adult or young child. When you have a younger individual, they're not fully capable of ruling a kingdom. Whether you think so or not, because you're probably thinking in your head right now, like, hey, I could totally be a king at like 14 or right now or 9. But honestly, when we talk about rulership and the ins and outs, there's so many things that have to be taken care of that a 9-year-old or a 14-year-old mind, that's not ready to deal with all those things. So what happens is they decide that Louis XIII's mother will serve as his regent, which means that she's going to be the person who's appointed to administer a country because the monarch is a minor or is absent or even incapacitated. So Cardinal Richelieu is going to become Louis XIII's most trusted advisor. So he's going to advise Louis's mother, and then as Louis gets older, he will advise him as well. Now Richelieu's goal, though, is that he wants to strengthen the monarchy. So he's trying to build up the monarchy, make it stronger, more powerful, more centralized. So this is Louis XIII. Check out that hair. Then you have Cardinal Richelieu right here. Now, Richelieu's forces, they're going to hold the Huguenots inside of the city of La Roche, which is an area in France. And what's going to happen is that he's going to keep this siege going for over a year, okay? And eventually what will happen is that the Huguenots will wear down. They will finally surrender. And Richelieu is going to order that all churches become Catholic. So what you have to understand is that Cardinal Richelieu is completely associated with the Catholic Church, which I figured you know that. But he is very anti-Huguenot, okay? So, and you've seen that Henry IV did work to try to give the Huguenots some type of rights or some type of, limited rights to worship as they please, okay? And Richelieu is going to want to take that back, and he's going to want to make France, and all the churches. So there's no Huguenot church. There's a Catholic church, and that's it. It's his way or the highway. So Richelieu's spies are going to uncover a planned revolts against the king by nobles, and they're going to punish those who are involved. And so what Richelieu and Louis XIII are doing are they're going to reduce the power of the Huguenots and even the French nobles, because they have become kind of like a power team of intimidation. And they're strong and they're powerful. And they catch on to everything. Like Richelieu exposed this plan. So these people get punished in front of everyone in France. So then people in France are like, hey, can't mess with the king. You can't do anything underhanded to the king. When we talk about the monarch and Louis XIV, I hope that some of you have heard of Louis XIV, but he's going to be known as the Sun King. And he's a very prosperous king. He is intelligent, and he's very wealthy. So he's going to be the son of Louis XIII, if you know Louis XIII, 1314. So then he's going to lead France during a time of great power and prosperity. So he's the Sun King. He's bright, he's prosperous, he's amazing. He takes the throne at a young age, and his mother will be his regent. But she will receive advice from Cardinal Mazarin. And this is a picture of Louis as the Sun King. So if you can see that he has like elaborate details on his outfit, crazy headdress, and the sun on his chest. Now, when Mazarin dies in 1661, Louis declares that he would run the government himself. He's going to make it an absolute monarchy. Remember that an absolute monarchy is when you have complete control or power over your government. It's your way or the highway. No one else gets a say. Now, he began a tradition of the French absolute monarchy. Okay, and this is France, Louis XIV. And when we talk about it, by drawing so much power to himself and the central government, he's going to take power away from the nobles. So, guys, you have to remember that usually in monarchies, it's the king or the queen, and then the nobles have a lot of say because they have power and wealth and education. And Louis is going to be like, I don't need y'all. I can kind of handle this myself, so I'm going to take some power away from you. And you don't need so much influence in our country. Now, their influence declined further when Louis built the enormous palace at Versailles outside of Paris, okay? And 10,000 officials, servants, and courtiers came to live in that palace. And I actually have a link right here, and I will post the Prezi online so that you guys can actually click it and take a virtual tour of Versailles because it is absolutely beautiful. Now, France's wealth grew, okay, and because of the policies of Jean-Baptiste Colbert, which is the Minister of Finance, and he called for limiting imports. Remember, imports are what are coming in, and he's going to increase the exports, which is what's going out, in order to build wealth. Colbert also changed the tax policy to maximize money coming to the government. Another way that Louis established an absolute monarchy was by smashing the power of the Huguenots once and for all. So he's just going to smash it out. So in 1685, Louis made his move. He's going to cancel the Edict of Nantes. And then he, remember this document had always protected the Huguenots. And he's going to outlaw the Protestantism in his realm. So he's like, there will be no Protestantism in France. So over 200,000 Huguenots are going to leave France. And here's the Edict of Nantes. Put a big X over it because he's anti all of that. And he is going to go to war in Europe. Louis is going to say, you know what, we need to expand and we need to reclaim territory that we had formerly ruled. And we need to have some more power. So his most famous war is going to be the War of Spanish Succession. And this is when the Spanish king had no heir. So he had named Louis the 14th's grandson, Philip V, to succeed him. So what's going to happen in Europe, though, is that the European powers, they're not going to want France and Spain to be so closely connected because before, when we talked earlier about Spain, they were enemies with France. But if France and Spain consolidate their power, they will be a strong force in Europe. And so they, went to war against both countries. So other European nations are like, oh, heck no, we don't need them getting together and they'll be too powerful. So after many years of fighting, Philippe remained the king of Spain, but in the Treaty of Ulrich, France is going to have to give up much of the territory that they wanted to claim. So what you need to understand is that Spain and France are trying to align. The rest of the European countries are not going to like this, so they're going to fight that. And so Philippe is going to still be king of Spain, but signing this treaty, he's going to have to give up, and him and France, they're going to have to give up much of the territory that France wanted to take back and claim, because Spain and France now want them to get too powerful. Now, England. When we talk about England, you're going to have the Tudors, which if you remember the Tudors, they're going to be Henry VIII, Mary I, Elizabeth I. Now, the Tudors are going to be a strong family, but you need to understand that they're religiously divided. When we talk about Henry VIII, he is going to convert England to Protestantism, and you remember this because you remember that Henry wanted to annul his marriage from Catherine of Aragon. They would not allow that to occur, so what he's going to do is create the Church of England, and he's going to use it with the Act of Supremacy. Now, Henry's daughter Mary is going to briefly return to England, but remember that she returns it to Catholicism, but she dies from cancer. You remember she's married, she dies, and so Elizabeth will take the throne as queen. Elizabeth I is going to reestablish the Church of England. She works well with the Parliament, but she strongly believes in her divine right as queen. She's going to say, listen, God chose me, so you must, what I say goes. But I love to work with Parliament because you remember Parliament is a governing branch in the government during this time, and they help with laws and things like that, and they are advisors and they have a say as well. Now, you have Henry VIII, and you're going to go to Mary I. You remember Mary dies from cancer, and then Elizabeth will usher in that golden age, and I talked about that a little bit earlier in the presentation. Now, the Stuarts, though. The Stuarts are going to come into play, and they're going to be the next family to take over in England. When we talk about Elizabeth, she's going to die in 1603, and James I of Scotland is going to become king, and he's from the Stuart dynasty. Now, he believed in divine right of kings, but he needed money from Parliament, which he needed assistance. Now, Parliament is not always going to give James I what he wants, and he has a hard time with that because he believes in divine right. God chose me, you should do what I want, you know. He's going to have religious tensions that are also going to trouble him. A group called the Puritans, which are a group of strict Calvinists, okay, so they branch off from the Calvinism, are going to want to lessen the power of the church officials and lessen what they saw as Catholic practices left over from the Reformation. So they still see flaws in the church, and they're pointing those out in the Catholic Church, and he's not going to like that. Neither is the Catholic Church. So James is going to refuse to pass most of the Puritan reforms. So any changes that the Puritans are discussing, James is going to be like, yeah, I'm not passing that. Also, though, what he's going to authorize is the English version of the Bible, which I've never known this, but that's why we have the King James version of the Bible. And when James dies, his son Charles I is going to become king. Now, we're going to have an English Civil War. Okay? So what's going to happen, first of all, is when we talk about a civil war, it's when you have two groups of people fighting each other. And they're from the same nation. So here are the problems. In 1640, Charles and Parliament will begin to have some massive issues. They're not agreeing. They're not, seeing eye to eye. And in 1642, Charles interrupts Parliament in session, intending on arresting 5 members for treason. Okay? But the men fled. And Charles's plan was to take back the power, and his plan was revealed. Okay, so he's trying to take back the power from Parliament. And some members of Parliament decided to rise against the king, and the English Civil War began. So here's Parliament. And what's going to happen is that in the beginning of the war, you're going to have supporters of the king, which will be known as royalists, and then the Parliament's army, which will be known as roundheads. And there's Oliver Cromwell. And let me scroll up so you can see. There's his name, Oliver Cromwell. And what he's going to do is that Parliament and the Roundheads. So what's going to happen is that their leader, the Roundheads' leader, is going to be Oliver Cromwell, an army general and a Puritan member of Parliament. And his army takes control of London and Parliament, and the group left behind was called the Rump Parliament. I know, it's kind of funny, Rump Parliament. And they charged the king with treason and put him on trial. So Charles refused to be recognized, even recognize the authority of the court. He's like, you don't matter, you have no authority over me, I'm king. But then he's going to get sentenced to death, and then he's beheaded in 1649, unfortunately. Now, the effects of the Civil War are going to cause the House of Commons will be abolished, and the House of Lords and the monarchy and England is going to become a commonwealth. So they're going to get rid of the House of Commons and the House of Lords and even the monarchy, and it's going to become a commonwealth. You need to write this definition down. Make sure you're writing all these notes. But a commonwealth is a republican government based on the common good for the people. So it's all about the people now in England. And at first, Cromwell ruled England as Lord Protector. Then, in 1658, he dismissed Parliament to rule all by himself. So what is that? It seems kind of like he's trying to mix it up and make it just like a monarchy, but he wants to rule. Now, the monarchy is going to return, though. So what's going to happen is that Oliver Cromwell is going to die in 1658, and his son is going to take power, but he's not strong. He's kind of weak. So in 1660, Parliament is going to vote to bring back the monarchy. They're like, oh my gosh, this guy's doing terrible. We got to restore what we had. So they're going to bring Charles II, which is Charles I's son, back from exile. Now, he's going to support religious toleration. So he's going to be open-minded about the Protestants. He's going to reopen theaters, and he's even going to pass habeas corpus, which is an act that says that you are guaranteed trial if you are accused of crime, or you have the right to appear in court. And last but not least, later, after Charles II, King James II will take over in 1685. But he's very unpopular. I'm noticing that, and I hope you've noticed, the kings are very unpopular, and the monarchs are becoming unpopular. So what they're going to do in 1689 is Parliament is going to say, hey, we would like for your daughter and son-in-law to take power. So James is like, oh gosh. So he flees and leaves for France. And this bloodless transfer of power, because there's no warfare, there's no bloodshed, is going to be known as the Glorious Revolution. Make sure you underline or highlight that. Parliament made William and Mary agreed to a new English Bill of Rights, which is rights for the people of England. And they kept the monarchy from overruling Parliament's laws as well. So it's going to maintain a common checks and balances between the monarchy and the Parliament, which neither part of the government can get too big. So the monarchy can't overrule the Parliament can't overrule the monarchy. They can't outdo each other. They are equal, in a sense. And so when England, it's going to take from that, evolve from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy. And this is when a monarchy is limited by certain laws. Okay, and this is a picture of William and Mary taking the throne. So it must be kind of a bummer that it's like, oh, your dad's not really great at ruling, but would you like to take charge? And she's like, sure, okay. So this is the end, and tomorrow we will pick up with Russia. Make sure you remember that you can stop, pause, stop or pause, rewind, fast forward, but make sure you are listening to this lecture because it is very detailed.